trigger a mental movie. Now, imagine you're me, a few months ago, driving to the US border from Canada to visit my girlfriend who lives in the States. The car is silent, my heart is racing. Crossing the border always makes me a little nervous. Something about a lone 30-year-old male seems to raise flags. You see, I've been questioned and searched before, and the thought of being turned away is unsettling. So at the booth, there's an agent with shockingly red hair and a serious look on his face as he scans my passport. Purpose of your trip, he asks. I'm going to a wedding with my girlfriend, I reply, trying to sound casual. He scans the inside of my car with a suspicious gaze. My stomach drops. Then, he unexpectedly cracks a smile and says, "Well, where is she?" I burst into laughter at the unexpected joke, and relief floods through me as he stamps my passport and sends me on my way. Okay, do you see what I did there with that little story? I didn't just tell you the facts of what happened. I didn't just summarize the events, like saying, I crossed the border and the agent made a joke. No, I tried to bring you into the moment with specific dialogue and details. Well, that's what good storytelling does. It triggers a mental movie, letting your listeners relive the experience using their own imagination, emotions, and senses. So the next technique is show, don't tell. Let's say you're at a party trying to make your friend Jake, a really nice guy, look more impressive to a woman he's dying to go out with. Well, instead of just telling her Jake is a great guy, it's way more effective if you show her with a vivid picture. If you said, I once came home to find Jake several feet up the oak tree in our front yard, his arm reaching out to grab this tiny white kitten that was stuck up there, with a crying little kid watching anxiously from below. Now, I tell you, that image will not be easy to forget. So the number one rule of storytelling taught to writers is show, don't tell. An easy tip to do this is to replace weak verbs like was or felt with stronger ones. Example, don't say he was angry, say he slammed the door, or say he hissed, get out. And when you're telling stories out loud, in person, you have way more tools to take advantage of. You can change your voice to fit different characters, reenact the actual dialogue and gestures with your body. Think of it like putting on a miniature play, allowing your listeners to not just hear what happened, but experience it. Audible variety. Now imagine you're me as a kid, an altar boy in a red and white robe, hands folded together, standing at the front of a church. You're struggling to stay awake as the priest drones on in a monotone voice, each sentence delivered in the same slow, rhythmic pace makes it hard to keep your eyes open. Now, for writers, one of the best tips ever is to vary your sentence length. Gary Provost beautifully illustrates it with this quote. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. So, write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Don't just write words, write music. Now, when we are speaking, we can play with the speed of your delivery, your volume, speak louder to energize people and softer to draw them in, like you're telling them a secret. And don't forget pauses. In their own way, silence is powerful. Next technique is to remove filler. Speaking of holding attention, it's crucial not to ramble. So if you feel like your stories are too long, here's the most important tip to shorten them. Identify the peak moment, the heart of your story. Focus on this key point and cut away the rest. Remove anything that doesn't support that peak moment. For example, if you're sharing how you met your best friend at a Comic-Con, skip the boring details about how you got stuck in traffic on the drive over. Just get to what matters. Look at a top creator like Mr. Beast, who often shoots hundreds of hours of footage, only to throw away 99% of it, distilling days of events into a few minutes. Spielberg himself has said, a movie is just life without the boring bits, and my favorite, this insight from Stephen King, which is when you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. When you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not the story. Next, we have leveraging story structures. Picture this. It's the early 1980s and you're Steve Jobs. Apple is still a relatively small company, and you're launching the first ever Macintosh computer, but you have a big problem. How do you convince people to take a risk and spend thousands of dollars on your new computer, when instead they could buy a reliable machine made by your largest competitor IBM? Well, Apple pulled off one of the greatest marketing victories of all time, and they did it by tapping into one of the oldest stories in history, David versus Goliath. In this well-known biblical story, a small young shepherd named David must fight a giant brutal enemy soldier named Goliath. The odds seem hopelessly stacked against him, but David manages to take down this giant by hitting him between the eyes with his trusty slingshot. Apple's 1984 ad campaign for their Macintosh computer positions IBM as Goliath, the behemoth of conformity and convention, the computer used by unoriginal people in suits, while Apple is David, the underdog, challenging the status quo. This strategic storytelling reframed the Macintosh as no longer a risky purchase, but the tool you need if you want to be creative and a rebel. It's no coincidence that Steve Jobs later also founded Pixar, where he once told the leaders, the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. So if you want to tell powerful stories, perhaps the biggest shortcut is to not start with a blank page, but borrow from proven story structures that have been passed down for hundreds of years. These include David and Goliath, there's Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, and many more. But perhaps the most universal and powerful of these story structures ever is the hero's journey. What if I told you that many of your most beloved characters like Harry Potter, Frodo Baggins, and Luke Skywalker all follow the same hidden pattern? They're actually following an ancient formula known as the hero's journey, or monomyth, identified by mythologist Joseph Campbell. Here's a quick rundown of the 12 stages. 1. Status quo. Your hero's normal life before the adventure starts. Think Harry Potter living in the cupboard under the stairs. 2. Call to adventure. Something disrupts your character's regular life. For Harry, it's receiving the letter from Hogwarts telling him he's a wizard. 3. Refusal of the call. The hero often hesitates at first, like when Harry doubted if he truly belonged in the wizarding world. 4. Meeting with the mentor. The hero meets a guide who helps them on their journey. Think Hagrid, or later Dumbledore, or in other movies Gandalf or Yoda. 5. Crossing the threshold. The hero commits to their journey. For Harry, it's going on the train to Hogwarts through the barrier at platform 9 3/4. 6. Tests, allies, enemies. Here, your hero meets friends and foes, like when Harry meets Ron and Hermione, but also Draco and Snape, and learns the rules of his new world. 8. Ordeal. The major challenge or conflict occurs. Harry confronts Voldemort. 9. Reward. After the ordeal, the hero gains something valuable, some treasure or wisdom. In classic fairy tales, this is the gold beneath the dragon that must be defeated. 10. The road back. The hero starts their return to the ordinary world. So, all these steps are definitely overwhelming for daily storytelling, but we don't have to worry. There are much simpler story structures we can use. For example, Dan Harmon's Story Circle. Dan Harmon is the brain behind shows like Community and Rick and Morty, so he simplified the hero's journey into just 8 steps. Usefully, this structure can be summarized in a single long sentence. Here it is. 1. You. The main character starts in their comfort zone. 2. Need. But they need something. 3. Go. So they go towards an unfamiliar situation. 4. Search. They struggle, learn, and adapt. 5. Find. Find what they wanted. 6. Take. Pay a heavy price for their goal. 7. Return. Then return home. 8. Change. Having changed. Now let us comprehend this structure through the cinematic piece known as Sausage Party. So Frank the Sausage starts off in a grocery store dreaming of being chosen by humans to enter the great beyond. He hears the terrifying idea that humans eat food, and he needs to find out more. A shopping cart accident makes him explore the store's secret areas. He learns tough lessons along the way with the help of mentors like Firewater or the Liquor. Frank goes through a terrible journey, a dark night of the soul, to find a cookbook that confirms his worst fears. Then the food items must fight a bloody battle with the humans in the store. They win, taking control of their own destiny and celebrate with a wild R-rated party. Then Frank and Brenda are forever transformed by their new understanding of reality. And finally, we'll look at an even simpler story structure called the 3-act structure. This is widely used in screenwriting and storytelling. This one breaks it down into just 3 key parts. Act 1 is the setup, introduces the main characters, their ordinary world, and the central conflict or problem they must confront. Act 2 is the confrontation. This is the longest section where the main characters face obstacles, find solutions, and experience the story's main twists and turns. And Act 3 is the resolution, the climax of the story where the main character faces the ultimate test, solves the main problem or conflict, and as a result is changed. The hook. Now picture this. You're laying back on your couch, browsing for a new show to watch, and then you see one that might be interesting and you think, I'll try this one for a few minutes. You see a few shots of the desert. Suddenly, blue pants flying through the air? Wait, what? A middle-aged man in his underwear, wearing a respirator, speeding through the desert in an RV, police sirens blazing behind him, beside him unconscious human bodies in a cloud of mysterious gas? In just 1 minute, you have so many questions. You're officially hooked to one of the greatest shows of all time, Breaking Bad. Now that storytelling technique is called in media res. That's Latin for into the middle. Think of how many Hollywood movies you've seen that begin with a dramatic car chase. It's about skipping that rambling introduction and dropping the audience right into the middle of the story. Journalists and content creators use a similar technique known as not burying the lead. That means they put the most important or interesting part of their story up front to capture our attention instantly. For example, let's say you're making a tutorial video on crocheting mittens for kittens. Well, you wouldn't begin by yapping for 5 minutes about what you made for breakfast. You'd start off right away by saying that you're going to talk about crochet. That will pull your audience in with exactly what they came to see. And also remember, in video, visual hooks can be far more effective than words alone. Our next technique is story equals intention plus obstacle. So now you're hooked on Breaking Bad. You're following the story of Walter White, a teacher turned meth maker. What does he want? He wants to pay his medical bills and financially secure his family's future. But what's stopping him? A series of growing challenges. First, he needs to make money, which leads him to cook meth. Then he needs a place to cook, so he chooses an old RV in the desert. Then he has to sell his product, forcing him to team up with Jesse Pinkman and dive into the dangerous criminal underworld. Aaron Sorkin, a master of storytelling known for hits like The West Wing and The Social Network, teaches us that every compelling story comes down to 2 key questions. 1. Intention. What does your character want? 2. Obstacle. What stops them from getting it? The character's intention makes them relatable and drives your story forward, while the obstacles, they create tension and conflict, which are essential for an interesting narrative. So, if you cannot answer those 2 questions, then you do not have a story. Now let's talk about adding stakes. Imagine it's late 2024 and you open Netflix to watch a hyped boxing match between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. You're not alone. Over 108 million people tuned into the fight, making it the most streamed sports event ever, according to Netflix. Why are so many people invested in what happens? Because it's not just the fight. Underneath it, there's a story. You see, both characters in this story have something important at stake. Mike Tyson, the boxing legend, is fighting to prove he still packs a punch despite his age. Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned fighter, wants to legitimize his boxing career by fighting against a true icon. If Tyson loses, it could stain his legacy. If Paul loses to someone 30 years older, then perhaps he's not a real boxer. Adding stakes means we know what a character stands to lose if they fail. Character change. Peter Parker was your typical high school kid dealing with the usual teenage issues like a crush, bullies, and school stress, but everything changed when he's bitten by a radioactive spider, giving him super abilities. You're probably familiar with this story. However, Peter doesn't become a hero right away. You see, at first, he uses his powers for selfish gain, entering wrestling matches to win money, and he refuses to stop a criminal that is running by, and that criminal later kills his Uncle Ben. It's a tragic loss that he could have prevented, and that changes him forever. So that's the real moment that Peter decides to become Spider-Man. The the selfless hero we know who understands that with great power comes great responsibility. Matthew Dix, a seasoned storytelling champion and author of Storyworthy, calls this the 5-second moment. It's an essential moment in any story when your character undergoes a significant change. He wrote, "Your story must reflect change over time. A story cannot simply be a series of remarkable events. You must start out as one version of yourself and end as something new." Now, if you want to get better at storytelling and communication, you should check out Growth Summary. That's my book summary service that breaks down all the best nonfiction books from top experts, so you can learn how to speak better and be more influential and persuasive. Plus, you can even try a free trial at growthsummary.com.